We open it up to any questions that any of you might have. So there's a microphone here, and just feel free to come up to the mic, share your name, share where you're from, and share any question that you have. But first, one that's come from our internet-based audience. How can I open my heart back to my parents who hurt me physically and emotionally as a child? This is asked by Marcia from Ecuador. So this is what we were talking about in the Ganga Arati around forgiveness. When we don't forgive, our heart is closed. But in order to live a spiritual life, our heart has to be open. You cannot live a life that is spiritual, that is happy, that is peaceful, that is meaningful, with a closed heart. If you said, what is the prerequisite, non-negotiable prerequisite for a spiritual life, a happy life, any religion, it doesn't matter? An open heart. Because without an open heart, you can't really love. And if you can't love, well, every spiritual tradition is rooted in love. If you can't love, then spirituality and life are going to be very, very hard for you. So if our hearts are closed, we're closing ourselves off from life. Now, it's challenging, as she's asked, I had parents who hurt me physically, emotionally. How do I open my heart back to them? And this is where it's so important to recognize that the actions that people do, when those actions hurt us, they are done by people who are suffering themselves. If I have an illness and I sneeze on you, I'm going to give you my illness, especially if your immune system is low. If I cough on you, or sometimes if it's a really bad illness, all I have to do is breathe on you or be kind of near you, and you will pick up my illness. It's not that I went into the conversation deciding, I'm going to make her sick. It's just I am sick. You were near me, and so I made you sick. When we are young, our emotional immune system is very low, meaning we are very dependent. We are very vulnerable. We are very dependent. We are very needy. All of the sense of who we are is being formulated. It's like our physical bodies are very vulnerable at that age. As the body is growing, it's very vulnerable. If you harm children in certain ways, they'll never recover. Emotionally, our immune system is low. So when we're harmed as children, that illness, that dis-ease that came from the person who hurt us stays with us. The problem is, it then leads to disease in our life. It's not just like getting, a cold or a flu or COVID or something else that somebody gives you by coughing or sneezing. It's like getting, it's something severe. We have to let it go, though. And so this is the beautiful question of how do we reopen our hearts? So the first way is we recognize they were not trying to harm you. They did not decide, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to mess up our kid. Parents, no matter how messed up they may be, their aim is always the same, that they're going to raise wonderful children. They may not be able to do it, they may not have the capacity, but their aim and objective is always that they are going to give all their love, all their time, all their energy, all their teachings to this child. Problem is, when they are diseased, living in a state of dis-ease, their fear, their anger, their confusion leads to them harming us through word, through action, through inaction. But we have to realize, number one, they did not mean to harm us, even if it was physical. I guarantee they did not wake up in that morning thinking, I know what I'm going to do, I'm going to harm my kid. But it means that whatever happened in that moment, they were unable to tolerate it. Their own, what we call san shakti, was so low that they couldn't tolerate what was happening in that moment, and they acted out violently. Wasn't our fault. We just happened to be the harmless, vulnerable ones nearby. So we got the brunt of it. Sometimes when people get angry, they punch a wall. It's not the wall's fault, obviously. But the wall bears the brunt. You punch a hole through the wall. Punching bag didn't ever do anything to anybody. But everybody goes and takes out their anger on a punching bag. In the same way, sometimes people who cannot deal with their own emotions, if there's a wall nearby, they hit a wall. There's a punching bag, they hit a punching bag. Otherwise, they hit their kids. But it's not the fault of the child, obviously. So number one, we recognize and realize they didn't intend for it. They didn't mean it. They just were doing the best they could, even if it was not very good at all, with the way that they were struggling in that moment. And what that does is it frees our heart up. Our heart closes because we feel like we did something wrong, that somehow we are unworthy of love, of goodness, of care. We close our heart. And we close our heart because we think we can't trust. After all, they were the ones who were supposed to take care of us. If we can't trust them, how can we trust anyone in the world? So our heart slowly closes and closes and closes. And then we learn to forgive. And we open our heart not in acceptance of what they did. We're not condoning what they did. We're not giving them a gold star for Parent of the Year. What we're doing is we're showing them the compassion of understanding that they were struggling. Understanding that they were not in a position to be healthy enough to raise kids. You know, to drive a car, you have to pass a test. If a cop pulls you over and you're drunk, license gets taken away, you get thrown in jail. But parenting, no test, no prerequisites. Do it drunk, do it on drugs. No rule that if you're drunk, your kids get taken away. No rule that if you use drugs, your kids get taken away. The bar is much higher for somebody to actually take kids away. Almost never happens. But licenses get taken away all the time. So sadly, to drive a car, you need a license, there's all kinds of rules. But to actually give birth and raise kids, no license required, no exam, no class, no parenting school. Like, we all had to go to driving school. You had to learn all the rules. Nobody goes to parenting school. So we have compassion for the fact that they were unprepared not properly educated in what to do, didn't have recourses, didn't have tools to turn to help them. So again, it doesn't mean what they did was okay. But what it means is that we're able to open our hearts in compassion to people who meant well, but were themselves very young and struggling. And mostly we open our hearts in the awareness that we as the child were pure, were innocent, were perfect, and didn't deserve any of that. So we open our hearts to ourselves as well. Because when we close our hearts against those who harmed us, we close our hearts against ourselves as well. So we have to reopen our heart. And that's what forgiveness is. And again, it doesn't mean it was okay. It doesn't mean we give them the gold star of Parent of the Year. But what it means is that we don't carry the grudge with us anymore. That we don't let what they did to us 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 35 years ago, 50 years ago, continue to stay with us and harm us. The heart gets opened, first in love to ourself, in compassion for ourselves, and then in compassion for them. So yeah, it's a very, very big challenge, but very, very, very important. If you can't forgive, you can't live. Yeah, other questions? Yes. He'll just turn it on for you.
Namaskaram. Last week, one of your sessions, you mentioned about the content consumption.
Can you come a little forward and just speak more into the mic so we can hear you better?
Okay?
Oh, much better, thank you.
Yeah. Last week, in one of your sessions, you mentioned about the kind of content we consume affects our state of mind. So in that context, can you please tell us something about the significance of Svadhyaya?
I am so sorry, I'm not able to understand what you're saying. Can you just speak a little bit more clearly into the microphone?
I want to understand about Svadhyaya.
Svadhyaya,
Self-study.
Sure.
For the spiritual purpose.
Sure, beautiful.
So what to read, how to read, and why to read.
Great. Svadhyaya, study of the self. Svadhyaya is not only one of the most important parts of a spiritual path, but it's one of the niyam. We say yam and niyam, which are the foundation of yoga. And Svadhyaya is in the niyam, means the habits, the practices. It's a study of the self that can happen in several ways. First of all, Svadhyaya always includes, or always should include, study of spiritual literature. So you'll notice Svadhyaya is not joined with dhyan. Otherwise, dhyan itself, meditation itself, is in fact the deepest and best way to study the self. But dhyan doesn't come until limb number 7. Svadhyaya is down there in limb number 2 at the very beginning, the foundation. It means in the beginning levels. We begin by studying scripture. We study the writings of the masters, because only by learning that do we even begin to know where to go in. So if I don't know anything, and I just sit to meditate, well, unless I'm very lucky, very blessed, and very unusual, what's going to happen is my to-do list is going to come into my mind. My list of grudges is going to come into my mind. My nose is going to itch. My knee is going to hurt. Like, I'm just going to be sort of stuck in all of the things that come to me. Which is why first we learn, first we study about the self, but through the masters. So we read scriptures, whatever our religious tradition may be. We read writings of wise beings, masters, that teach us and remind us, you are not your body. They become, Svadhyaya becomes much like the finger that's pointing, that's showing us where we are going in our study, so that by the time we get to dhyan or meditation, we actually know what we're looking for. So Svadhyaya, I would say on a practical level, make sure that every day you're doing two things. Number one, reading something that is inspirationally spiritual or spiritually inspiring. It doesn't have to be scripture. Every once in a while it should be, for sure. Read the Bhagavad Gita, read the Upanishads, read the Srimad Bhagavatam, read the Mahabharata, read the Ramayana. You know, these are core pillars, not just of religion, but they're pillars of understanding ourselves, the nature of the world. But it doesn't have to be only that. It can be the lives of the saints, the lives of the masters, teachings, anything. So do that. But also have a practice of journaling, writing. And write not your grudges list. This one did this to me today, this one did this one. But write what comes to you based on what you have read. How do you internalize what you have read? What does it mean for your life? What is the personal application of what you've read? Because writing down all of our grudges, it makes them stronger. One of the best ways to remember something is to write it down. That's why when we're studying in school, we're always supposed to write notes. Right? Teachers always take notes, be sure to take notes. Because just listening, we think we've learned it, but we don't learn it nearly as well as if we actually write it. So you don't want to start writing your lists of grudges or writing ignorance. This happened today, this one said this one said that. Don't do that. Let those go. But journal about the application of what you have read. What does it mean for you? Bhagavan Krishna says this. What does it mean for me? Bhagavan Ram says this. What does it mean for me? Yamraj says this. What does it mean for me? How do I understand it? How do I interpret it? So do both of those. And then, of course, obviously have a practice of meditation. And again, it's not officially included in Svadhyaya because it comes later. But when we take yoga and spirituality as a whole, it's a critical part of Svadhyaya, because the best way of actually studying yourself is through meditation. But you need ideally these other two to form the basis of the mind that goes into meditation. So that you know, oh, in meditation I am looking to experience that pure awareness. Oh yeah, thought has arisen, but I'm not the thought. Then you've got a direction when you go into meditation. Yeah, Svadhyaya is very important practice. Wonderful. Other questions? Yes, of course.
Earlier regarding the forgiveness.
Just one sec. Can you let him just get the mic on?
Yeah. So continuing to what you were already telling about forgiveness. So, okay, there is a child who has gone through that trauma and all, and now tries to forgive as well. But the parents at their own side are still continuing with the same thing. They are treating that child the same way they were treating earlier. They have not changed. The child at its own self is trying to forgive and forget the things done in the childhood. The child is growing and somewhere expecting that family support as well, right? The parents, on one hand, somehow are just calling for whenever they need help. That child also somewhere is missing that parent love.
Yeah.
How to deal with that?
Great question. I'm going to make it a little bit more broad, and then we'll come back to the specific. How do you forgive when the person is still doing it? She said the child was abused, now the child is forgiving, but the parents are still abusing. How do you forgive while it's still happening? Well, forgiveness does not mean you become a doormat. I always remind people, spirituality does not make you a doormat. It doesn't make you weak. It doesn't say, walk all over me. You can forgive and take care of yourself. You walk through a park, you get bit by a dog. You go to the hospital, you get your rabies shots, you get the wound bandaged. You're going to forgive the dog, right? You understand the dog had rabies. Mad dog, because it's actually sick, it has rabies. That's why it bit me. Otherwise, it's a nice dog. But it had the disease, or maybe you walked on somebody's lawn. The dog was trained to be a guard dog. You've somehow encroached on their property. So to protect its owners, the dog bites you. Now you'll forgive the dog, hopefully. Hopefully you're not going to need therapy for 10 years to work through your anger at the dog. You're going to forgive it. But that doesn't mean that you keep walking through that same part of the park. It doesn't mean you keep walking on those people's lawns so the dog can keep biting you. You understand, oh, there's a dog that bites here. Stay away. Where there is harm, you need to protect yourself. Whether it's physical harm, whether it's emotional harm. Forgiving does not mean that you keep putting yourself back in that same situation to be abused again. It's a very important point. Now, in the specific situation, parents, they're still harming, they're still abusing, but of course, whenever they need something, they ask. Child is still longing for that love. On a physical harm level, as the child gets older, what happens is, now the child is no longer vulnerable. When we're young, we are small, our parents are big. We are weak and vulnerable, our parents are strong. But over the next several decades, the situation reverses itself. Now we have become strong, full-sized. Our parents are now getting older, they are weaker. Now, even if the parents have not changed their personality, their ability to bring harm to the child is not really there anymore. When we are young and a parent raises a hand to hit, okay, what are we going to do? But when you're a full-grown adult and a parent tries to raise a hand, I sure hope that you are going to protect yourself. Doesn't mean hit the parent back, but it means do whatever you need to do to protect yourself. Not to act like a 5-year-old, vulnerable, helpless, weak child. You're now a strong adult, able to protect your physical body. Especially against people who are now much older, much weaker. And you need to do whatever you need to do, first on the level of protecting yourself physically. And if the only way to protect yourself physically is to literally fight back, then you need to stay away. Because obviously nobody should be fighting back physically against their parents. But if the parents are still abusing, then you tell them very clearly, I am sorry, I cannot come over. I cannot come over because it is not safe for me to come over. You harm me, you abuse me. Out of respect, I would never raise a hand against you. But I cannot keep myself safe without raising a hand against you. I don't want to do that. That is why I'm not coming over. But if, as they get older and weaker, you are able to protect yourself in their presence without raising a hand against them, then be in their presence. Recognize, again, that they don't know any other way. Now again, that doesn't mean you deserve it. It doesn't mean you should let them harm you. But it means that you start, as we age and mature, we start to become able to see people in all of their weaknesses. You know, if you look, for example, at people who are on what we call the autism spectrum, and it can range from very severe to quite mild, and there's a great variety on the spectrum. One of the characteristics that is true for many, not all, but many people on the spectrum, is they do not like to be physically touched. And especially those who are more on the severe side, especially when they're young, if you, meaning well, try to go and kind of put your hand and, the way we do to kids, you could actually find yourself bopped in the nose or in the face or in the eye because they have reacted against being touched. Now, you're not going to hold a grudge against that person, whether it's a child or an adult, because you understand there is somewhere a malfunction in their neural circuitry that has created a situation in which my touch felt like a threat, and they reacted in the only way that in their malfunctioning neurocircuitry that they are able to. They're not wrong, they're not bad. But, again, you're going to be sure not to put a hand again. You're going to be sure to stay, a few arms lengths away, out of love and out of protection against yourself. And in the same way, if parents over the numerous decades of their life have not learned to stop harming, it means there is a malfunction in their neural circuitry. There may not be some diagnosable neural challenge that they are suffering from, but I guarantee you somewhere there is a malfunction in the emotional aspects, psychological aspects, mental aspects, anger management aspects, whatever it may be, purely developmental aspects. You recognize that. You find a place in you that can forgive them for that, so that you don't take this anger to the grave. Because forgiving people who have died is much harder than forgiving people who are still alive. Most people end up having to learn to forgive people only after they've died. But it's a lot harder, it's a lot more painful. It's much better emotionally, psychologically, spiritually, if we can learn to forgive people while they are still alive. It also gives them the benefit of actually rising to the occasion. Because when you forgive, you let go of your end of the karmic cord. And when you let go of your end, the tension in the cord dissipates. And that frees them up to maybe, no attachment, no expectation, but maybe rise to the occasion. You never know. Sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. But for your emotional and spiritual growth, that forgiveness is critical. But don't let that forgiveness prevent you from taking care of your physical or emotional health. That's first. And if you need to do it from afar, do it from afar. If they are not safe to be around, don't be around them. Help them from afar. But if you can figure out a way to be in their presence, not all the time, occasionally, sometimes, I think you'll find that it allows you to heal on a much deeper level so that you don't have to wait for them to die. Otherwise, people only start living in their 50s, 60s, 70s, which is, it's a little late to start. You know, it's never too late, however old you are, start. But ideally, if we can start a little bit earlier, it's better. Wonderful. Yeah, other questions? Yes. It's no problem, come. Anybody?
So, my name is Pranit. I was at about 5 years old. I was abandoned by my family, and I was put up in a hostel where I've been physically abused by my seniors, both in a good way and a bad way. And then I had to...
There's no good abuse, by the way.
Maybe,
Yeah.
perhaps, yeah. I'm sorry. So it was very difficult for me to bring myself up. I started working from the age of 13. I'm 37 at the moment. And my mother got married to my stepfather. And until last 2 years, I wasn't completely aware of that he was my stepfather. She told me that he is my own father. He abused me physically. He used to really hit me very hard until I used to bleed from my ears. And then they couldn't pay for my good education as well. I started working from the age of 13. I did a very odd job. I worked as a cleaner, started from 300 rupees, and today I became a celebrity personal trainer from South. I've trained NTRs, people like that.
Wonderful.
But then I have realized I lost my brother, my stepbrother, when I was in class 6. So I still have these flashes coming into my life. And then it was really tough for me to, sometimes handle my emotional balance. And even today, after when I got to know about the truth about my mother and everything, I forgave her. So also at the same time, I raised a boy. He's 24 years now. And my stepbrother again. Again, I thought he was my own brother until last 2 years. So it was all, they kept me in a dark place. And then it is really taking a big toll on me. And even though I became successful, again, I went back to square zero. And emotionally, I get those flashes in. And even today, my mother gives up on me. The minute I have some tough battles happening in my life to, take care of them. So I'm the only whole and soul guy who brings bread and butter to the family. And when I'm in a tough situations, my mother still gives up. She leaves me and she'll go. And she's also facing some health conditions, which I take care of it. And I'm also undergone a lot of debts to take care of my own family. And I'm unable to, take care of myself the way I take care of them. The only thing is, I'm a very disciplined guy. I eat clean, I work out every day, I meditate. Sometimes I divert myself from the meditation because of so much happening in my life. And I am getting exhausted these days. I handle literally everything. I take care of the house, I clean the house, I cook and also I feed the dogs on the street. I cook for them as well, and I've been doing that for over a year now. That is from my heart. From the last 1 year, I am trying to open my portals. I'm trying to heal, but every time I meditate, I tear up. I get those flashes, and I still don't know where my father is.
Okay. So you've had an incredible amount
Yes, and
of
also
challenge.
I got divorced, and she got married to my best friend. Yeah, so many things happen.
Yeah, so let's start young. You've had a very, very difficult childhood.
Yes.
It's not surprising that you ended up on subconscious level recreating that pattern in your marriage. This is what we do. When we have patterns that need healing, when we have patterns in relationships that we haven't healed from childhood, we tend to recreate them in adulthood so that we are forced to face them. You've suffered an incredible amount, and you've managed to come out of that suffering in a very, very powerful and very beautiful way. So, first of all, really, congratulations. It is not easy.
Yes, ma'am. I also battled so many suicidals.
Yes, of course. It's not easy. It was much more statistically likely that you would have ended up abusing alcohol, abusing drugs, joining gangs, in prison, etc., etc. The fact that you have gotten to where you are is in and of itself a beautiful testament to your inner strength. Now, that was phase one. Phase one was survive. You've done that fantastic. You get an A+ in survival. Now we're working on thriving. You are safe. You have created a life in which you are safe. Physically safe. You've created a strength within yourself that should anybody dare to raise a hand against you, you will show them one. You've created a life in which you are financially stable.
Yes.
You've created safety and security. That was what was needed for survival. Now let's shift from surviving to thriving. In order to survive, you needed really to, in a sense, block yourself from all of the awful things that happened and just move forward. Get out, get safe, protect yourself, make your own way, get yourself through school, get yourself the job, get yourself on your own, do all of these things, and you've done them and you did them great. But to thrive, we have to take a little bit of a peek back. And the reason that I know that is because you're having these flashes. The flashes are basically saying, hey, look at me. Hey, look at me. Hey, don't forget me. Don't forget me. When they arise, don't push them away. Don't push them. They're part of your karmic journey. They're part of this beautiful role that you have played on planet Earth, a huge part of which is going to be to inspire others. through what you're doing, you're going to be able to teach other youngsters how to survive, how to take care of themselves, how to have strength. But in order to do that, you have to not push away those flashes that arise to you from the past. So when you're meditating and they come, don't dive into it, don't drop into a story. Just acknowledge it, bow to it, and then bring your awareness back to your breath, back to the mantra, back to whatever you're meditating on. But acknowledge this. Acknowledge it, don't push it away. And I would really recommend getting into some kind of good therapy that's going to help you work through the incredible trauma that you suffered.
I have consulted psychologists and also psychiatrists as well. And then they have prescribed me some pills. Due to that, I had to undergo pancreatitis.
Yeah, I wouldn't, we can talk about this more another time, but I wouldn't necessarily rely on pills. Sometimes they're very useful and very important. I'm not anti the medicine, especially if you're having suicidal thoughts. They can be very, very helpful. If you're severely depressed, they can be very helpful. But it sounds to me like what you need is someone who's able to help you work through the trauma, not just medicate it away. Someone who's able to help you acknowledge, see what you've been through. Then, and suddenly now with learning that, your father wasn't your father, your brother wasn't your brother, that there have been all of these lies that you've been told your whole life. I think having someone who can contain that for you would be wonderful for a temporary period of time so that you are able in a safe place to work through that, because you now need to be able to really thrive. And in order to thrive, you need to stop overworking yourself in such a way that you're running from your thoughts. Whenever you see that much movement, what it's a good signal of is, I can't be still, because if I'm still, these thoughts come. As you've said, I try to meditate, but then there's too much to do. For me, that's a big red flag, that there's parts in you that don't want you to experience that which arises when you meditate. And so they come in and they're like, oh my God, get up off your mat. You got to do this. You got to do that. Get up, get up, get up, get up. And really what it is that internal little boy who wasn't able at that age to experience, to digest what was happening to him, and who needed to just move forward. But you're not that little boy anymore. Now you're a strong man. And now you have the ability to look back on what happened with love for yourself, with compassion for yourself. And to really acknowledge that and to acknowledge the trauma you went through, because I see that you're going to be able to play a really beautiful role in helping other youngsters who are traumatized. But if you're running from your own experiences, then you're not going to be able to hold space for others when they come to you. Then your advice to them is just going to be get busy. And being busy is wonderful, but you don't want to be so busy that you don't actually have time to feel what you're feeling. But in order to help others feel their feelings, you need to first allow yourself to feel yours. So I think it would be really wonderful for you to find someone you could work with. Not forever. I don't think you need medicine. You don't strike me as someone who needs to be medicated at all. I think you've done fantastically. I just think that you need someone who you can trust, Every single adult in your life has betrayed you. Everyone you put your trust in who was supposed to take care of you has harmed you and betrayed you. I think you need to have someone who you can work with, who you can trust, to set a new sanskara in you of being able to trust the world so that you can exhale and you can stop having to run and you can stop having to be quite so busy and you can start actually taking care of yourself so that then you can be even more equipped to better help take care of others. Yeah.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Have a beautiful, beautiful rest of your evenings, everyone. And a beautiful day to our family joining us from all over the world. And so much love to you all.